I'm going to grab my Bible. I'm going to use this today. We're going to use a Bible for the first time, so it's a big day for us. I'm just kidding. We use that every week. Glad you're here for this beginning of this series. We're going to talk about produce and producing and using that play on words way too much, about how we produce things in our lives, how we produce these things in our lives, and what that looks like to have fruit of our lives, what it looks like to have a faithful life, and what that fruit is that's produced into the world through that. Now, I'm probably the wrong person to talk about produce or producing anything that's near produce. I'm not good at this. I have no green thumb. I have no idea what I'm doing with that stuff. I grew up with a family who had a farm in Oklahoma, and it's in an area called No Man's Land because nobody else wanted it. And I'm not joking. We took an area of Oklahoma, it's on the panhandle of Oklahoma, called No Man's Land. And during the land rush where people were moving west and taking over different parts of the west, nobody wanted this land. And then my family was like, well, here we are. Lucky us. So we have this land that does not produce well. It's not good at this. It takes a ton of work to make that land make anything. And so one of the big things we grow there is we grow cows and we grow sheep and stuff like that. But we also have always grown alfalfa, if you're familiar with that. That is a real thing. That's not just a little rascal. And so we grow alfalfa, we grow hay, different barley, things like that on this land. And my grandfather worked his tail off to make this place a thing that actually could grow something. And every summer, it was my responsibility as one of the grandsons to come back to the farm and help on the farm. Again, my help was not necessarily what was in the progress or positive direction of help. Most of the time, I think I set us back quite a bit. But I would go and help every summer. And I remember there was one summer where I was about 12. I think I was 12 years old. I was still I think I was like 8th grade-ish is where I think I was, because it was a big deal. I got there and my grandfather was like, I have a field that I want you to take the tractor and you're going to do some planting. And we have this tractor, and it has this big attachment on the back, and I've already tilled the soil, and so you're going to do some planting. And so I went out with this big tractor, and he sets the thing up, and he shows me, here's how you turn it, and here's how you make sure that you get all the corners just right, and here's how you make sure that you don't go outside of where you need to, you just went, you don't miss like a row, or you don't miss a circle, or the areas that you're supposed to be in, and you don't double up in that area too. Here's how it looks. And he shows me the whole thing. And I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And then he leaves. He just leaves me there with me and a tractor and this trailer. And I'm like, I'm going to do awesome. And so I get in the tractor. I'm taking it very seriously. And I'm watching every little bit of what I'm doing and making sure that I'm taking the corners just right. I'm not double planting, but I'm also not missing anything. I'm doing everything exactly the way he told me. And then my uncle shows up, and he pulls up next to me, and my uncle, this is my grandfather's son, he does run the farm and actually knows what he's doing and has sons that know what they're doing because they're apparently real men. And so they show up, and he gets next to me, and he pulls up next to the tractor, and he says, what are you doing out here? And I was like, well, Grandpa left me here, and I'm out here planting these seeds. And he's like, wow, is that what you're doing, huh? I said, yeah, I'm planting all these seeds. I said, don't worry, I got it down. I know how to go down the rows. I know how to turn just right. I know how to make sure I'm not double planting or missing anything. He's like, yeah, that's great. That trailer you have on there does not do seeds. And I was like, well, what does it do? He was like, no, it's just like a trailer to like move stuff. And so my grandfather left me there. I think this was an intentional move. He left me there. I was just driving around. I was doing nothing. I was wasting gas in a tractor for a good afternoon all by myself there while he knew I could do less damage that way. And so I just drove around. But here's the thing. I knew that when I came back later that year, I came back in and I knew that I had learned something valuable. I knew that what I had done was going to pay off. That work, that training I had done was going to pay off. And so when I got back the next summer, my grandfather was like, hey, I know that you went out and you did the seeds. So now it's time to do the harvest. And so we have this other tractor that has this big attachment on the back, and it will actually start to reap all those different pieces. And so it goes through and it tills the soil. It actually picks everything up, and it's going to make it into the final product. And he's like, you've worked hard, so you should go do that. And so I go out to the field, and it's a different attachment on this tractor, and he leaves me alone, and I start driving it. And I'll be darned if my uncle doesn't show up again a little bit later. This is not a joke. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm getting the harvest. I'm the one doing the harvest this year. He's like, no, buddy, you're not. That's another trailer that does nothing. You are just spinning some tires for the afternoon. And so, guys, I'm here to announce I'm going into farming. I'm quitting. I know what I'm doing. So no, it never paid off, by the way. My grandfather literally thought it was better for me to waste the money on gas and time than it was for me to try to be helpful on the farm. So I'm probably not the person to talk to you about this. I'm not a farmer. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to produce. But here's the thing. I do know that there is a part of us that no matter how bad we want to pretend we don't, we want to produce something in this life. We want to bear fruit in this life. We want our lives to count for something. There's a reason I was dumb enough to go twice into that tractor and believe that I was going to be helpful and produce something, because all of us have something. It could be in your job, but it also could be in your life. It could be with your family. It could be a legacy that you want to have. It could be something where you want people to remember the way that you took care of your community, the people around you. You want to leave a legacy behind. I would guarantee that every one of us in this room, we want our lives to have meaning. We want fruit to come out of our lives. We want something that we can bear witness to, and that the world will bear witness to, and it will be a better place because we were in it. I don't think any of us wants to go to our funeral someday and people be like, man, that guy he was just a jerk, and that was the end of the story. Or that person was just bad at what they did and really didn't help anybody. Or that guy could not plant to save his life, and so he just drove tractors around and wasted gas and killed the environment. You don't want people to say that. You want them to bear fruit. You want people saying good things about you. You want that a sense of accomplishment. And I guarantee all of us have a part of us, and I believe this, if you're following Jesus, there's a part of you that knows that we are here to leave this place better than we found it. We are here to restore a broken world. That's what we're here for. But the reality is we're not going to get to the fruit of this until we understand the roots of this. And today we're going to talk about the roots and how this all begins and what it looks like to be rooted in this foundation that therefore we can bear fruit into this world. Now here's what this series is not going to be. This is not going to be about productivity. This series is not about productivity, meaning like here's 10 steps to do your job better, or here's some time savers, or here's like some hacks on these things. This is not a BuzzFeed listicle. This is going to be something that actually we're going to have a little bit more work to do. I hope it's a little bit deeper than that. That's not what this is about. It's also not about production. We'll get to that next week. But it's not about production looking like we're bearing fruit when we're not actually doing anything. That's not what this is about. It's about actually bearing fruit that for this world will be a better place, a place that is the place that we believe that as people who follow Jesus, it's supposed to be, a more restored, a renewed world that we're supposed to be a part of. So that's what it will not be, but it will be a series on how we create this kind of fruit of a faithful life. And so this morning, as we kind of begin together, we're in this series, this idea of produce, again, it doesn't just show up, by the way, just in this series or what we're going to talk about today. This is a theme that runs all the way through the Bible, right? All the way from Genesis, where we see a garden planted, all the way through Galatians, later on where Paul writes in this part of the book back here, where he starts writing about how there's these fruits of the Spirit. This picture of produce is something that is used over and over again to show the fruits of our lives. It's a physical picture, but it's also a spiritual picture. And today we're going to kind of get to both levels of that, the physical side of where you're planted, as well as the spiritual side of where you're planted. We're going to spend some time on that, understanding where these roots come from, because that's really the picture we see all through the Bible. Jesus himself says that in Matthew chapter 7, right? Jesus, when he's teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, his biggest teaching, the most famous teaching he ever does, he talks about these people that would be those that actually know what they're doing and those that don't. And here's how he says it. Watch out for false prophets. They that come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. He says this, by their fruit, by what they produce in their lives, that's how you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? No. Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, here's the point, the summary statement. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Jesus is looking for fruit in our lives. He's actually interested in that. Again, all of the Bible narrative uses this fruit analogy on two levels to talk about where we physically are and where we are spiritually as well. So, as we begin today, I want to look at Psalm chapter 1, verse 3, as Tammy read for us just a second ago. If you have your Bible, you're welcome to turn to that. Psalm is kind of right in the middle of your Bible. If you kind of turn it, like if you just do this thing right in the middle, you'll probably get close to Psalm, and you'll end up in Psalm 1, very first Psalm of all of the 150 Psalms that we have recorded. In this very first Psalm, it starts out with this. So blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. But those who delight in the law of the Lord, and who meditate on his law day and night. That person is like a tree, planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaves does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. So you see in this, there is a picture here of something that is planted, something that is producing, and then something that prospers. You'll see this archetype set up here. It's something that's planted here. It's something that starts to produce where it's planted, and then eventually it starts to prosper. You see that? It's the last word in this psalm. It will prosper. There's an archetype being set up here by David that we'll see as we go through really the entire narrative of the Bible, but those three things start to play out. And what's interesting to me is as I look at this, there's this idea that where there's a place, there will be prosperity. But it comes from the place that you're in. The place is where you prosper. Now, there was a time where if you wanted to build a business, if you wanted to have a relationship with people, there was a time where if you wanted to pursue somebody romantically, there was a time where even if you wanted to worship in a body of believers, that proximity mattered. Like you had to do that within a certain area, a certain geographic location. You know what I'm talking about? That was a real thing. We're so far from that, I don't think we remember that. But there was a time where any of those things would have to be done in proximity with other people. In fact, there's some studies that show post-World War II, really pre-1940 especially, that most people who grew up in a certain geographic location in the United States, 75% of those people would stay in that same exact city or town for their entire lives. 75% of only 1 in 4 would leave. 75% of people would stay in that exact town their entire lives. Then post-World War II, really from it's kind of interesting actually, but 1950 to 1970 was the most moving we saw in the United States ever. At that time, 20% of people were moving every single year post-World War II. That's when we started to really suburbanize, and we really started to urbanize, but mostly suburbanize. We really got good at that, and people were moving 20%. 1 in 5 people were moving every single year for about a 20-year segment, which is pretty long. And then in the 70s, that stopped. But some of you might be part of that generation where you're like, if you trace it back a little bit, your parents or your grandparents were the people that were in that 50s to 70s time where they were moving, and now you're kind of either a product of that or whatever you want to call it, but you've been part of that. And then after the 70s, it started to slow down a little bit. Right now, stats show that about 57% of people stay put in their hometown, or at least in their home state, I should say, in their home state for their entire lives, 57% of people. So it's moved from 75% down to about 57% people staying in their own state, at least. So we've become this transient community where we started to move a lot. We're not geographically rooted anymore, and we're not rooted in many ways at all. You guys know, we live in Tampa Bay. How weird is it when you meet somebody who grew up here? Like they'll be like, oh, I grew up here, and you're like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And they're like, no, seriously, I lived here. And you're like, I don't think so. And then you hear, and then the first thing they'll go to is like, I remember when Highway 19 was a one-lane road. And you're like, okay, all right, here we go. We got to hear that bit, don't we? But I mean, I've only been here, I've only been here in 7 years, 8 years. And I mean, we can all have that conversation, right? I remember when 54 actually had not a Panda Express on every corner or whatever. It was wild. Remember that? You could just drive and see cows. It was crazy times, Oh man, what a time to be alive. Yeah, but that was the way it was. It was different, and you guys know this, but as people move to Florida, it is a geographically changing location all the time. Some of you are transplants, some of you are transient, you came into this community, and that's the way we live. A lot of us live our lives that way. But what happens is there is a part of us, I think, that desires, I think both on a physical level and on a spiritual level, I think there's part of us that want and we crave this sense of proximity and place. I think we crave that in some form or fashion, right? Because now I don't have to have, to be a part of a business, I don't have to live in any one location. Many of you probably work for businesses that don't do business in this location. You work for something that works online. You have a business that works even overseas or whatever. You have a team all over the country that you never even see in the office, and you're not even sure if they really have legs. right? You've just seen them from here up. You're not even 100% sure they're like a whole, person situation, right? And like you have those people, right? We live in this culture where that's the way it can work with a business. That's how it can work in relationships with other people. I mean, like FaceTime has opened up a lot of doors where you can FaceTime people and you can see them through Zoom or through, it used to be Skype or whatever. You could spend time doing that if you needed to. One of my favorites right now is the people that I'm in a relationship with. I love it when they're literally just upstairs in the same house and I get a text. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we can do better than this. It is a pet peeve of mine. Like, just get up and yell. I'd rather you get up and yell at me than just send the text downstairs, but it is what it is, right? Because we've been able to, with technology, we've been able to do these things that changes these even romance. Like, even when you were romantically involved, there was a time where you had to like be near the person you were getting romantically involved with. You had to like somewhat be in proximity with them, whether it was like a college or it was a club or it was a church or whatever. And then you would be near those people. Now it's you're swiping right? That's all it takes. It's so much simpler, but it's also so much more complicated, by the way. And so we have this whole thing now. You don't even have to do that to be romantically involved. Church, a place of worship, you don't have to do that to be in worship anymore. I mean, we have this whole culture, and really COVID only made it worse, but we have this whole culture where you can just watch online. You don't have to go to a place or be a part of a thing. You can just watch it, observe it, take it in, and leave, right? And it's fine. And so on a Sunday morning, you can scroll from Joel Osteen to Stephen Furtick or whoever your person is, and God bless you if those are your people. I'll be praying for you. And then you can just scroll through whatever's on your Facebook feed, and that's part of your proximity. That's what works. In fact, there's a great book that came out a couple years ago called Celebrities for Jesus. And this is what their definition is of a celebrity, which I thought was actually pretty interesting, is her definition, Kathleen Beatty, her definition is that it's social power without proximity. Somebody is a celebrity when they are not actually near you enough to actually know you or have any real say in your life, yet they have the social power, but they don't have to be proximate or nearby. They're not in the same place as you. That's what they call this celebrity. And I do agree with that definition. I think it makes a lot of sense. When we look at this, I think that we fall into this category where we're kind of craving that connection again. I think we're looking for that. One French philosopher, Simone Weil, wrote this in a book that she wrote all about this called The Need for Roots. And it said, to be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the soul. Like just to be rooted, just to know where you fit, who you are, where you're at. To know those things is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the soul. And this is a French philosopher writing, but even we see that with Christian writers. Walter Brueggemann, who wrote an entire book called The Land. And The Land is a book all about really the concern he had as a philosopher and as a theologian about having endless choice but zero responsibility. And I think we live in a culture where we have endless choice and zero responsibility. But in this book, The Land, which Walter Brueggemann is a man who, oh bless his heart, you know that guy could not spell his name until like 6th grade. That last name, look at that last name, you kidding me? But he said this, it is rootlessness and not meaninglessness that characterizes our current crisis. It's not just that yes, meaninglessness is bad, but our rootlessness, we don't even know what our foundations are. We don't even know where to start. And in one of my favorite books in the world, Eugene Peterson wrote a book called The Pastor. Yes, Eugene Peterson, who wrote the Message version of the Bible. And yes, I'm a heretic, and I've read it, and I think it's great. And so I'm probably not going to heaven, and that's fine, but I think it's great. Eugene Peterson, he wrote a book called The Pastor. It's honestly my favorite book on ministry and what it looks like to be a pastor. If you don't know, it's all about Eugene Peterson writing about how he was a pastor of a large church in New York City and was like, this is not what pastoring is. And he moved to the middle of nowhere, Montana. And I don't know if you know this, but Eugene Peterson, the guy we all have heard of, and if you've read the Message or Bibles like that, Eugene Peterson pastored a church that never broke the number 200. They never had more than 200 people in attendance, and he felt like that was his call in ministry, was to be in a place like that. But he said this, the place you're in gathers stories, relationships, it gathers memories, like the physical place that you're in. But many of us were so transit, we don't know this, like we don't know how to feel about that or what it looks like. But when you read what happens in Psalm chapter 1, you see a very clear picture And it's interesting because Psalms 1 starts not with just a song, but with a picture of what it looks like. Psalm 1:1. So again, let's go back through this really quickly. But it says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the company of mockers." Now that first word there, you see, blessed. This is like the blessing. Now this isn't just a word that it means this person is blessed. It actually means that is a blessedness. Here's what that means, is it actually goes out to the community. This isn't just for that person. This is something that it benefits others as well. It's a blessedness, which is different than just a blessing on that one person. It provides for other people. It's producing some sort of fruit. In fact, the word here in Hebrew is kind of interesting because this is the word esher, would be the word that is blessed right here. But that's not what it's not in this moment. David or whoever's writing the psalm, the way that they write it is they actually make the word plural, which means that they're looking at like an exponential amount of blessing. Like it's not just a little bit of blessing. It means that it's not just for one person. It's exponential. It's plural. It means it's for everybody. It's a blessedness, a happiness. And one theologian, Boyce, wrote this. He said it's either a multiplicity or intensification of blessings. That's how he characterizes this word in the Hebrew, is that this is a multiplicity of blessing. Notice this. So it's not just for the one person. It's for all of the people. It's for everyone. It's producing fruit. And notice the little progression that happens. So back in verse 1 right there, it says, "Blessed is the person who does," now notice the progression, "walk in step with the wicked." Secondly, notice what then they do. Then they stand in the way that sinners take. So there's a movement here. They're walking with the wicked. Then they start to move down the way, like the way of living is what that means, like the way of the sinner. They're moving towards a way of living. It becomes a pattern in their life. It takes over. And then the third part is, it says, and then they sit in the company of mockers. They become so accustomed to it. They were walking with it, checking it out. They've now made it a pattern of their life that now they're so comfortable they'll just sit in it. They are now rooting themselves in the way of the wicked. See, here's the thing. You can be rooted, you can be seated, you can be stuck in something without even realizing it. You will be rooted in the wrong thing. But then this picture changes really quickly. In verse 3, or in verse 2, it says, "But whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night?" That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither, but whatever they do prospers. Again, they've been planted, they've produced fruit, and now they are prospering, not just for themselves, but for the community around them. Now, here's what I love about this tree analogy, is the tree, here's what it can't do. I don't know a ton about trees. I'm not like a botanist, and I need to just give you that disclaimer because you're going to be like, this guy sounds like he's really smart. Get ready. Here's what I know about trees, is from what I can tell, there's no way for a tree to work any harder than it already does. Like, I've never seen one tree that's next to another tree, and one of them you're like, that one does the steroids, and this one doesn't. Or that one goes to the gym 5 times a week, and this one should try harder. Like, they only know how to do as much as they know how to do. Right? Does that make sense? It's the same amount of effort. So what that means is one of these is not just working harder to be a better Christian person. A tree is not just working harder to be better at producing things into this world, and they're just trying their best. It has nothing to do with their output. It has everything to do with their input. Here's what the input is that they're next to a stream of living water. See, it's about them being in the right place. It's not about their production or productivity. It's about where they're planted. Does that make sense? When I've seen a tree that seems pretty successful, it seems to have had the right things around it that have made it successful. It doesn't seem like it just can will itself to be better at being a tree. And you have to ask the question in your life and in mine, where are you planted? Like where are you at? What is the place that you're in? Reality is, all comes down to the place that you're in. That's what's going to make this successful or not successful. You can't work harder. You can't want it more. That's not the goal. It comes down to what the input is, not what the output is here. And what we want to focus on when it comes to producing and being people of making fruit is we're also worried about the output, that we forget to worry about the input. What's coming in? Am I being filled by the right sources? Because here's what I think we're often fueled by. I think many of us were fueled by fear. We sang about it a little bit ago, that my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love, because I'm standing in something. But many of us, I think, were fueled by fear. Like, whether it's a fear of not being enough, whether it's a fear of not having enough, we're constantly fueled by fear. And we live in a world that wants to stoke that all the time. Have you watched a news channel? You choose it. Any of them. What is the goal of that right now? It's to stoke fear in you so that they can sell you the solution to your fears in the commercial breaks. Why are you not sleeping? Well, it's because of this mattress, not because of what we're telling you. You need a better mattress. You need a pillow or whatever. Right? Like, this is the issue you're having. No, it's because we continually live in a world that stokes fear, and we buy into it. Some of us are planted right next to a stream of fear. That's where we're planted. Some of us, I think, were planted next to anxiety. I think we're concerned about everything and doing nothing about any of it. I think some of us were planted next to a stream of anger, if I'm being honest. Some of us, our lives are built on anger. Like just being mad about everything, and that's what fuels us, and it makes us want to produce more because we want to have revenge on others. We want to show them who we are and how we're better than them or what they told us we'd be. And so many of us were fueled by anger. I think a lot of us were fueled, again, just being honest, I think we're fueled by approval. I can speak to that one quite a bit. I think I'm fueled a lot by just the approval of others. It's what I call the tyranny of living for the approval of others. I want other people to think I'm doing a good job, and so I produce this fruit so that I can have that, but it's only about the output. It has nothing to do with the input. Some of us, I think, we're fueled by pain, the pain of our past, the things that we're trying to get past. We're trying to move through those things, so if we can just produce enough, people won't see the pain that's underneath all of it. Some of us, I think, we're fueled by popularity. Like, we just want to be cool. We want everybody to like us. I don't know if that resonates with any of you. But for many of us, I think we're fueled by the wrong things. And what we start to do is that's when we become about productivity, not about produce. So it becomes a life where we just have to continue to make things as fast as we can so that you never see what's really going on inside of us. We'll get to that more next week, but I think a lot of us live in that exact spot where it becomes about productivity, it becomes about production, because I don't want you to see what's really going on. And so we don't worry about what's coming in. We only worry about what we're putting out. But that's not how we make healthy fruit. That's not how we bring the right things into this world. That's just how we put on the show. In this, it seems to be that we need to have this stream of water, as it says, this stream of living water that continues to move past us, that we are planted next to that. That's what we need to be looking at to be people that are healthy. And we need a system that continues to fuel us. Mark Sayers wrote a great book, and I would highly recommend it, called The Reappearing Church. In this book, he's an Australian theologian. And in it, he wrote this. He said, "The promises of our cultural and political elites that things will get better are falling flat." Like, you've been promised popularity. You've been promised that you're going to have all your anxiety go away. But it turns out all those are falling flat. We have endless opportunities to pursue pleasure and our desire, yet so many of us are miserable and anxious. We can traverse geography, time, space, yet loneliness is growing. Silicon Valley's promises that a world connected by social media will be a better, more tolerant world now look ridiculous. The assurance that a globalized world will be fairer, more peaceful, and prosperous place seem shaky at best. And these failed promises are fueling a growing sense of dissatisfaction, a desire to see things change, a hunger for a vision of personal and social life in which humans flourish. So many of us, we've been trying all the wrong things. We've been trying all the wrong places to find this nourishment that we need to produce this fruit, and yet all these promises we've been made are not going to come true. They don't continue to come true. So we have to ask ourselves not just basically the question of where are you planted, but then the question becomes, what is it that you're producing? Like, what are you bringing into the world right now? What are you allowing into this world? What are the things that you're putting into and bringing to life all around you? See, this tree is not for itself. The tree is a blessing, as it says, is a blessing to the things around it. The tree would provide shade. The tree would provide security. The tree would provide this stability for the people and the things around it. I remember out on my grandparents' farm, they had a section that was all these huge pine trees that had been planted at one point. And I asked them about it. It was this whole wall of pine trees. And I asked them where those pine trees came from, because they definitely don't grow in the middle of Oklahoma. And they said it was back after the Depression in the 20s that there was these, if you've heard about the Dust Bowl days, so there was a time where these dust bowls would kick up really bad, and you would have dust everywhere, and it was killing crops, and you could not see anything, and it was literally like one of the worst times in American history for people that were trying to survive in that area. My great-grandmother actually got the black lung from the sand that was kicked up all the time, the dirt. It was actually living in her lungs. She had to move away for a little while and left my grandfather there to run the farm when he was just 12 years old. And apparently he could drive a tractor just fine at 12. Anyways, it's cool. We're cool. And so there was this long line of trees, and I said, where did that come from? They said, when the Dust Bowl happened and all this dust was being kicked around, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency at that time, there was a Roosevelt project, if you're not familiar with it, they were sent there, and they planted these trees to hold down the soil and to break this massive amount, these gusts of wind that would come through there. They put these trees there to hold the soil in place. Like, that's what this tree does. It provides stability, it provides shade, it provides fruit, it provides all these things for the people around it. That's what it's there for. It's not just for itself. And you have to ask yourself, what are you producing? What are you bringing into the world? Is it what you want to bring into the world? There's a very small book by a guy named James Davison Hunter, and he writes about this a little bit, and it's a great read. If you get a chance to read it, it's only 3 essays, pretty short, but he says this: for the Christian, if there is a possibility for human flourishing in a world such as ours, it begins when God's word of love becomes flesh in us. It's embodied in us, is enacted through us, and in doing so, a trust is formed between the word spoken and the reality to which it speaks. To the words we speak and to the realities in which we, the church, point. In all, presence and place matter decisively. If what you bring into the world, it matters because of the place you're in, because people will see it directly from what you're doing. They're not going to see it through your Facebook account. They're not going to see it through your LinkedIn. They're going to see it because you are with them, and the thing that you claim to bring into the world through Christ, they will have to see it in person to believe it happens. And he calls the church to be people of place and proximity so that we can bring this word into the world. And we're bringing life. We're bringing this life to the world that needs it so much. We're bringing this security to the world that's so afraid right now. We're the ones who are supposed to be bringing shade into this world that is so drenched and so exhausted right now by everything happening around it. We're the ones that are supposed to provide that. Yet so many times I think we're so fearful and we don't do that. We don't bring that life into the world. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we producing? This is why John, by the way, in John chapter 1, people are looking for the meaning of life in the Greek culture. They're looking for what life is supposed to be. They're running around trying to figure out what life is supposed to be. And I love what John does because he uses the word logos when he says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word is the logos. That's the word logos. But if you read any Greek philosophy at the time, Plato, Aristotle, anybody, they all use the word logos to say, what is the meaning of life? What is this all for? What are we doing? And John comes along and he says, let me show you the meaning of life. Let me show you what it's all for. Here's the logos. It was wrapped up with God, and it is God. God is this thing that you're searching for so much. That's what life looks like. I love that John uses that imagery because we are supposed to be people who bring that life into the world. And it only happens through place and proximity by knowing the culture we're in and speaking to that. Which takes us to what we read secondly. And you might think these are very disparate verses, very different, and they kind of are. But what happens in Jeremiah chapter 29, if you remember, there's this story of the Israelites after what we read through Leviticus and all that stuff. Remember, they have now become Israel. They have now become they've become not slaves anymore, but they are now those in charge of countries and nations. And yet they become oppressive. And yet they do exactly what had been done to them, and they start to see their kingdom crumble. Because God says, you are now the oppressors, not the oppressed. And he lets them fall. And when they fall into exile in Babylon. And Jeremiah writes this, which is really fascinating. He says, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. He says, build houses. Now, this is an exile. This is a country that hates your guts. And yet what he tells them to do is not fight them. He says, no, the first thing I want you to do is build houses and settle down. And then what are you going to do? You're going to plant gardens and you're going to make produce. You're going to have fruit in this land. That's what you're going to do. You're going to be in proximity with these people and you're going to show them what life looks like. You're going to be the security. You're going to be the ones who bring the shade into this place. You're going to be the ones who bring stability to this place. That's what you're going to be. He says, you're going to build these gardens. You're going to eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons. Give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also, notice this, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Do you see the same projection happens here? This same archetype shows up. Where we see is that we are going to plant, it's going to produce, and it's going to prosper. There's a planting, you are being planted in this place. Then you're going to see your produce come out of this, the way that you live within it, both on the physical side and on the spiritual side. And then the place will prosper because of what you've done. But I want you to see what's interesting is we have to kind of ask ourselves, who are we producing for? Who is this for? Who is this for? And it might just be that it's for the community around us. See, we're not like a church that just exists to be a church. We're a church in a city for our city. That's our role. It's to be for the community in which we're set. We don't come together to just be within four walls. We come together to recharge so that we go back into the city as rejuvenated people who are ready to restore the things around us. I would say we are rooted in Christ so that we can restore the community around us. That's what we're here to do. And notice what God says to them. He says it twice, but he says this in verse 4. He says that he carried them into exile. I carried you. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't that just a bad military or a good military came and took over a bad one. It wasn't just a war that you lost. It was intentional. I carried you into this exile. Many of you in this room, I just want to put this out there and maybe make a quick case that it wasn't your job that brought you to this neighborhood. It wasn't your job that moved you to this part of Florida. Maybe you were carried here. It wasn't the weather. Even though it might be better than where you're from, but right now, are you really believing that? Like, you're having second thoughts a little bit, right? Holy cow. Yeah, like, but you know, it wasn't the weather that brought you here. It wasn't that. It wasn't no taxes or whatever, no state tax. It wasn't that brought you to Florida. I did remember just the other day I was listening to, you remember Doc Rivers was the coach of the Orlando Magic? I don't know if you remember this at all, but he was trying to recruit Grant Hill to come play basketball down here. Grant Hill was playing basketball in Detroit at the time. And he said, as a coach, he would stand on the sidelines and yell at Grant Hill and just be like, no state taxes, 80 degrees. No state taxes, 80 degrees, just over and over again. And eventually Grant Hill signed with the Orlando Magic and came down here to play basketball. Thought that was a pretty great sales pitch. Anyways, doesn't matter. But like, that's not what brought you here. That's not why you're here. I guarantee you it's not the only reason. What if, I'm just throwing this out there. What if you were brought here, whether you're a native or you are a transplant, that you were brought here and you were supposed to be rooted here as the Israelites were because you were carried here? What if it was intentional? All of this was actually intentional. My daughter and I, we'll have to leave in just a few minutes because we have to get to a scuba diving lesson. We've been taking scuba diving lessons together as a father-daughter thing, and it's been really fun. The guy that we are taking them with, Captain Billy has a lot of thoughts. And Captain Billy he's a Venezuelan man. He has taught us everything, not so much about scuba diving, more about just the world and how the world works. And so we've learned about the Venezuelan uranium mines and how that affects the conflict right now in Iran. I'm still not exactly sure how that one works, but he tried to explain it while we're scuba diving. Like we're trying to like get things ready. We're trying to get under the water, and he's like telling us, like I don't have time for this one right now, Billy. I mean, I don't even disagree with all of his takes necessarily. We went on a long tangent or a deep dive, if you will, and maybe that's what he thinks this is for. About seatbelts the other day. He went on a whole thing about how we don't need seatbelts, and it's just that they're in with the government. That there's big seatbelt apparently is in with the government, and it's just a conspiracy that they're making money on every seatbelt sold, and therefore the people that own the patent are somehow getting bribes from the government to put them in every car or something. And I was like, bro, I just need to learn how to take my mask off underwater and clear it again. That's what I'm here for. But our first lesson with Billy, Captain Billy had a lot to tell us about being explorers. Because his first thing, literally the first thing we sat down, first thing he talked to us about was he said, so you're all here to find buried treasure. And I thought, I don't think so. I think we were just wanting to see some really pretty reefs. I wasn't here for the buried treasure conversation. And he went on that tangent for about a good 40 minutes about how we find buried treasure, which countries will let you keep it, which ones make you give it back, how you handle the ones that make you give it back and you go around them to find the ones that will let you keep it, and how many treasures he's found. Long story short, here's where I'm going with this, and I know you're like, what are we doing right now? Here's what I found interesting is he talked a lot about how Florida was set up by explorers. If you go back into the 1700s, 1800s, you're looking at people that came to Florida not because of the weather and not because of the tax situation, but because they were looking for mostly fountain of youth stuff, or sometimes they were looking for treasure or buried treasure. They were looking for things they were trying to find. They were explorers. And more often than not, they were not just explorers, they were exploiters, and they were taking advantage of the place that they were in. And they would leave it as soon as they found what they wanted or did not find what they wanted. It was just to come and see if it had what they wanted. If not, they were out. Here's what I would say is I think many of us still treat Florida and treat this area like we're explorers. We treat the community like we're explorers. If it has what we're looking for, then great. If not, then we're out. And we'll make that decision fairly quickly, but we really keep ourselves at an arm's length from it. We don't want to seek its prosperity. We only want to seek ours. We don't want to produce for it. We want to produce for ourselves. And we don't want to be planted in it. We want it to be planted for us, but not be planted in it. Many of us, that's how we treat kind of all of our relationships, I believe, but especially here just in our city and how we do life within it. But I mean, I even see it just inside of churches, inside of communities. This is how we treat communities all the time, by the way. Like people that we want to be accountable to, people we want to be in a relationship with, people that we think are important to us. I was looking back at a teaching similar to this, and I don't usually go back and watch what I teach because I don't want to see that again. Goodness, that's tough to watch. But I was watching a teaching I did not long ago, like it was a few years ago. It was kind of a COVID era. And I was watching it back and I was like, man, I seemed like real cranky, like just real angry. And I think I was. And I think there was a part of me, if I'm being completely honest with you, it was a tough time in church world. And I was kind of like, I think I'm done. Like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I remember like almost feeling like this disconnection from it, where I was almost like, just get me out. Because I think we all go through that at some level, right? But then there was this part of me that was like, but am I called to leave this? Or am I called to be planted within this? Like, we didn't plant this church for me to build a resume for me to go work at the chapel. But some of us, we treat our community, or we treat communities like that. I'm just here till I get the thing I want so I can go to the better thing. I'm just here till I get the thing I want so I can go try something else. I'm just here, and if it doesn't show up here, then I'll find it somewhere else. But I'm going to just treat it as though I can just walk away from it at any time. That's not what God calls his people to do. If they're going to be planted, they're going to produce. And if they're going to produce, it's going to be for the prosperity, not of themselves, but for everyone. As a church, that's my hope, is that if we were to look at ourselves, that we would be rooted in Christ, we would be worried about, not that those roots would be having fruit. And the fruit that it would have is that we're restoring the community around us. That's what we're called to do. Which takes us back to right where we started, with the philosopher telling us that maybe it's this rootlessness that is really the cause of so many conflicts in our soul. Maybe it's one of the most overlooked things in our souls, is that we need roots, both physically and spiritually. That we need to find the root system, and we need to find where we're planted. We need to decide what it is we're producing, and we need to ask the question of who are we producing that for. So today, we're going to take communion as we close. And as we take communion, I would just ask you to think about those questions, if you would. Just think about what is it that or where am I planted right now? Am I planted in fear? Am I planted in anxiety? Is that what's filling me? Is that what I'm putting into me all day, every day? Or am I planted by this stream where God is sustaining me and I'm looking to him? Secondly, what is it I'm producing? Am I a person who's producing love and joy and peace and all the things we want to see in this world, or am I producing more anger? Am I producing more anxiety? Am I producing more of those things into this world? And lastly, ask yourselves just, who am I producing this for? Am I serving the community the way that I'm supposed to? Is this prosperity both for me and for the community around me? So I'm going to pray, and then as we sing, we're just going to sing just a song together as you take communion. You're welcome to come over. There's communion over at this table. You're welcome to come get it at any time that you feel comfortable. Don't rush yourself, but you're welcome to come over. You're welcome to take that as a family. We have open communion here that you don't have to be a member or anything like that to take communion. And so just grab that. You can come back to your seat, and I encourage you to grab the elements, come back to your seat, and take that at your own pace where you're sitting as you reflect on those things and as we just kind of worship together.